one of the things we kept running into was we would look at brands, we would look at firms, look at what they're doing and go, wow, just isn't different. This is very copycat. It's very similar to what everyone else is doing. We'd even hear that strategy from partners in the firms of, just take what they're doing and put a different color on it, right? Or maybe even put the same color on it.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a great one. Our guest is a CEO and managing partner of ReSound, which creates strategic brand solutions for their clients. Mike Jones, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Michael. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. And ReSound, strategic brand solutions. I can't wait. I think this is right up the alley of our listeners. And I'm excited to dig deeper into this. But before we do that, let's have you introduce yourself to our listener and tell us a little bit about you and what's happened in your life leading up to what you're doing today.
Yeah. So, you already said my title and a little bit about us as the company that I run, ReSound. But really, if you want to go all the way back, graphic designer by background. I was doing that in high school and into college. And very quickly, in a couple different agencies, got sucked into the world of marketing beyond, the creative side. I was doing everything from websites. I was doing email marketing. I even did direct mail. That was actually a thing back then, and really got to understand a lot of different aspects of marketing. And then got introduced to this process called branding. And I think for a lot of designers that there's an attractiveness to that process, but really started to uncover there's a lot more to it than just the design elements beyond the logo, beyond the colors, the fonts, those kinds of things. And really looking at the strategy behind brands, what makes for great brands, understanding the value of message and positioning within that process. Got to do that at some agencies that I worked for. Even did it for one of those agencies, which was a really fun process. Wow. And then in 2009, with a couple friends of mine who were also creative and marketing oriented, started our own firm, which is now ReSound. Started back then and very quickly figured out that this idea of branding really resonated with us and with our clients, that we were kind of uniquely suited to do it for clients, kind of help them uncover what is their unique identity, what is this story that they need to be telling of how they're different, how they can cut through and how they can really provide value to their clients. Interestingly enough, unlike I think a lot of people in marketing and branding, I didn't have all these experiences with big consumer product brands. I had a lot of experiences with B2B and particularly service-based B2B companies, both in the agencies I worked for and then with the agency that I founded. And we've been kind of growing in that in the last 5 years, really started to own hey, we are all in on professional services in particular and financial services, and been doing a lot of thinking around that. And I know part of the reason we're here is because we've done a lot of data collection on particularly the accounting and bookkeeping industries with this thing that we call the Remarca Brand Index. I know we'll be talking more about that, but that's been a big focus of mine the last 3 years, is really studying the industry and really understanding what are firms doing that's setting them apart from a brand perspective. What are things that maybe they could be doing more of or doing differently and thinking differently about that. And then really trying to find data that can help validate these kind of assumptions that we've had for many, many years, for decades, about what makes for great brands, and see hey, is there an opportunity to really say, maybe there's actually some data around this. And I know when you work with accountants or accounting-minded people, data is a huge, huge asset. So I'm sure we'll get more into that as well. But that's really what we've been focused on. It's what I think about and do. The rest of my life, I'm very busy the rest of my life as well. I've got
Yes.
3 kids, as we were just talking about before jumping on the podcast here, and they keep me very busy. Always building Lego or doing lightsaber sword fights with foam swords in our house, and running around playing music. We have a great time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, interesting background. And yes, having 3 kids definitely creates a lot of variety in life. That's for sure.
Yes, it does.
Keeps it interesting. And so it was interesting too, because you had mentioned you are a graphic designer in the beginning. That's some of what you've did. And I noticed, one of the first things I noticed about you was your design and the logo and stuff like that. I was like, wow, it's really professional, very good looking brand already. So I get your background, some expertise there. But what also stood out completely, when I know our listeners are going, hey, Michael, when are you going to get to the question about the Remarca brand? Is that what you call it? The Remarca Brand
Index,
right?
yeah.
Index.
Yeah.
Interviewed 1,500 accounting firms from across the US and Canada, which has branding insights, including trends and patterns of these firms. I mean, this is pretty interesting for our listener, I'm thinking.
I hope so.
How did that come to be? What was the driving force behind that? Tell us a little bit about how you got there, and then we'll get into what it's saying and what it means to our listener.
Yeah, we've been working in the accounting industry particularly, and more broadly within financial services and professional services for at least 8-10 years now. And one of the things we kept running into was we would look at brands, we would look at firms, look at what they're doing and go, wow, just isn't different. This is very copycat. It's very similar to what everyone else is doing. We'd even hear that strategy from partners in the firms of, just take what they're doing and put a different color on it, right? Or maybe even put the same color on it. And some of that is to be expected. When you work in compliance and risk mitigation type work, right? That's what many of these firms are based on. It's hard to take risks. It's hard to kind of see where creativity can come into play and do that. But we work a lot with the marketers in the firms, and we would have these conversations with them where they were like, I know we got to change. We got to make some changes to our brand if we really want to stand out. But I don't know how to tell that story to the partners and the ownership and the stakeholders in the firm in a compelling way. And so one of the things we realized was there just isn't data out there to show them that you're really not being different. We kind of know it at an intuitive level as creatives and as marketers. We get it. Like, that's what we're trained in. It's what we've been working in. And we see all these case studies from other industries. We understand it. But it's hard to convince somebody who doesn't have that background that you actually are not different, that you're not actually doing it differently. And so that was part of the impetus to do it was let's actually study and look at and gather data from 1,500 firms and really see, are these assumptions right? Are people really not doing anything different from one another? We hear it anecdotally, but let's try to prove it with data. So that was the hypothesis we went in with.
We'll get back to the interview right after this word from our sponsor. Tired of juggling manual admin and everyday practice tasks when you'd rather be nurturing more valuable client relationships? With the new Sage for Accountants, you can automate daily tasks and unlock not only more efficiency, but more time for valuable client collaboration with all the tools you need, including accounting, payroll, client management, and more, all in one place. Get real-time reports to make informed decisions, eliminate hours of paperwork, and say hello to stress-free bookkeeping and practice management with a centralized solution backed by expert human support. Learn more about the new Sage for Accountants or get started for free at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com/sage. Thank you for hearing from our sponsor. Now let's get back to the interview.
And I don't think a grand surprise to anybody. The reality is, no, most firms are not differentiated. And that's what we were seeing. So we went and actually gathered 40 different data points from every one of these almost 1,500 firms. They're primarily public accounting firms. I know there's some bookkeeping firms in there and a few other financial services firms that are kind of related, right? Some like kind of fractional CFO or, advisory type firms are included in that. And we're growing that index year over year. We're now in our third year. We'll have our third edition released in 2025. But we collected over 40 data points. So everything from we captured logos, we captured colors on, at least what was publicly accessible. We captured taglines and messaging from websites. We captured social media data, in terms of follower counts. Do you even have a social media profile, at least that's accessible, that we could find? We're starting to look at, I didn't have it in the last index version. I was really hoping to, but we're going to have it in the next one, is looking at YouTube data, looking at video usage data. I don't think we'll have it in the next year, but I think in 2026, we probably will have some data around podcasting, because I'm very excited about that and interested in understanding how firms are using different tools. So not just simple, I think the baseline brand assets that everyone talks about or thinks about is logo, colors, fonts, maybe a tagline. And we also looked at names as well, naming conventions, how firms are named. So we took all that data, we put it through an analysis that we've developed based on principles that we believe are fundamental to great brands. And a lot of these are backed up by third-party people. And one of them in particular, we have a 7-step, we call it the Paul Rand logo design test that we use with our clients when we're designing logos with them. Wow, we've applied that to all these firms' logos. And that's things like, is it simple? Is it memorable? Is it functional, right? Can you size it up and size it down to really small sizes or really big sizes? Things like that. So we've applied all these principles. We created a scoring mechanism to basically score every one of them. And particularly, it's a score within the index. So it's really saying, compared to everyone else in this index, how different are you? And so it is a measure. It's one measure of differentiation. I would not tell any firm on our index, this is the only measure that matters. There's no other things you should measure. Certainly, you should measure probably your revenue, your profitability. At the end of the day, you're a business. So, right. This is one more tool in your toolbox, not necessarily the tool. Hopefully, it's helpful. I think we've had a lot of conversations in the last 2-3 years since we released the first version of it that I think have proven that out. And as we kind of expand who is interacting with our index, I want to hear more from people. Is this helpful? The other thing that we did with the index is we've created an annual report that we put out of that index. And that report essentially is our analysis of this data and these scores. So it's one thing to have the ranking or to have your score. It's another to go, okay, what are the most differentiated firms on the index doing? So we've broken the index into top 20%, middle 30%, and bottom 50%. And there's an assumption, hey, if you're in the bottom 50%, you're probably less differentiated than in the top 20%. So then let's go look at top 20% and go, what are they doing from a marketing and branding perspective that maybe is an opportunity for other firms to learn from and go, oh, that actually is helping them differentiate. And so we look at a cross-section. There's some really interesting insights, graphs and charts for those that are into that, to kind of look at these breakdowns of top 20% and then layered over a category. For instance, one of the most fascinating ones is okay, in the top 20%, what colors are being utilized? And how does that compare to middle 30 or bottom 50? No, it won't be any surprise to anyone. Across all categories within the index, blue is the number one color by a severe margin. So, if you are looking to differentiate, that's a really easy, quick one. If you've got the risk tolerance to change your colors, maybe
oh my
try
goodness,
a different
you're the
one.
Light blue. You're the light blue bookkeeping firm. I wouldn't have missed you for,
Yeah, or even leverage a secondary color. Bring in another color and hey, keep the blue. That's your primary. You've had it forever. Everyone knows it. That's fine. You're really comfortable with it. Maybe bring in a yellow or an orange or a green or purple or something else and start utilizing that to help kind of clarify that you are different than every other bookkeeping or accounting firm that uses blue. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of data, and
It's a
And
lot.
it really is interesting. And I'd love to know, like, one of our listeners, like, how do they leverage that report, that index? What's the best way for them to do that? Can they go and enter in and do their own score and get their score?
If they're in the index, they can get their own score. So first thing I'd recommend is get the report. That's totally free. You can go to rsnd.co/index and they can download that. Within that is an option to request your score. It'll actually be, you email me and I'll interact with you and deliver a score report. That'll include your score, your rank within the index, which I think is probably the more helpful tool. And what's been really interesting, a lot of firms are starting to look at their rank year over year. So they're using it as an internal measure of like, hey, is our marketing efforts having some impact? Well, let's see how we do year over year within the Remarca Brand Index. And then that score report also includes a breakdown of all the data we collected on your firm. So, and we'll be very honest, we get what we get. And sometimes we miss something or it wasn't clear enough. And so there's an opportunity to just clean up the data a little bit year over year or ask some questions around it. And then we also give you benchmarks within that. So like, hey, if we're looking at a particular score around your logo, well, what's the best possible score within the index? Not best possible score of total possibility, but what's the top score within the index itself? So it gives you an opportunity to kind of go, okay, if we're scoring like a 4, 3, or 5 on our like logo score, maybe the best possible score in the index is 7. Okay, that's the benchmark we're looking to aim at if we're going to do a rebrand. Some of that might be more, what are some tactical things you can do without doing a full rebrand to improve your brand differentiation? How can you really start to stand out? And we include in the report, obviously, the insights that we give around these different elements and looking at the cross-section of the index of these, top 20%, middle 30, bottom 50. We also provide some recommendations for firms that are not just the blanket statement, go rebrand, because we know like that's just not an option for a lot of companies, like at least right now, right? It might be, hey, 3 to 5 years, we'd love to do that, but we're just not there yet. Well, what are some other things that you can do that are like some small optimization opportunities? So those are like the primary ways you can utilize the index right now. We do offer some additional ways to go deeper with that. I hesitate to even say them. They're paid, the premium options for firms. I've been running workshops with individual firms. We give them a 90-minute workshop. We go through their score report, and then we have a conversation around their particular brand strategy and what are some things in the next 12 months that they could do to maybe improve their score. And that gets a little bit more into some qualified, opportunities that don't come out of the data. So, there's things like just looking at your own website, looking at maybe like things that we don't have at least currently collected in the data would be things like your industry mix or your solution or service mix within your website. How are you positioning yourself from an industry standpoint? Positioning is a really big one that is just hard to capture in this kind of data. And so there is an opportunity. I would encourage every firm, start keeping track of your competition if you're not already, and try to assume or make some kind of assumption about what their positioning is. What are they uniquely suited? Who are they best suited to serve? And then who are you best suited to serve? And how can you start to kind of position off of them and say, hey, not necessarily you need to call them out by name, but hey, there's other firms, they're really good at these things. We're good at this, right? We're for these people, or we fit this particular demographic or some other aspect of positioning.
Very interesting. There's a lot there already that I think it would be very interesting for our listener to go get the report, look at the index, and then as well, if you think it's something you want to go down, this is a great opportunity to get involved in the index. And then, of course, absolutely, is there something they want to work on, get some help and guidance from you guys sounds very helpful. I'd love to know, like, from your research, what are some of the big mistakes that they make, right? Yeah, obviously, choosing blue is not necessarily a mistake, but if you want
No.
to differentiate yourself, it's probably not the best color
Yep.
to choose, or like just have a blue painted all over the walls.
Yep.
What are some others?
Well, we can start with names. This is a really big one. If you're using founders' names or some acronym of founders' names, you're not differentiated. I think it was like over 95% of firms in our index had some form of founder-based names. And obviously, if you go up to like, especially in the accounting industry, you look at public accounting firms, they all kind of look at the big four and go, what are they doing? And they haven't done that, right? They all still use founders' names within their names. You know, you look at Deloitte, you look at E&Y, it's like they're right there. And my recommendation to a lot of firms is don't necessarily look at the biggest firms in your industry. Look at maybe the next tier down, because what you'll find with the biggest firms is that their size has compensated for some of these oversights. So like those firms can get away with some of these less than ideal best practices around their brands because they've just been able to scale so big for so long that they don't have to worry as much about challenges of differentiation with their name because so much of their equity is wrapped up in that name itself. If you're less known, and I would assume a lot of your listeners are probably not super well known
on that side. Yes,
right?
Yeah.
Your name is a fantastic opportunity to establish some amazing positioning and some like really good memorability. So be thinking about your name as a really core asset. And if you haven't been around for a long time or you don't have a ton of clients or customers, you have an opportunity to make changes that are going to be there's a lot less friction in that change. Than if you've been around 50, 60, 100 years, you have thousands and thousands of clients. Making those kind of top level changes is really difficult. Another really interesting one that we found was just the tagline usage, words within taglines. It will be no surprise to anyone. It was like, if you say business and tax, and especially in this industry, bookkeeping, if you say solutions, advisor, partner, trusted, these words are used by everybody. You're not differentiating. There might be another reason to use them. Maybe there's a little bit of an SEO play. You know that your types of clients are searching for those things. Okay. But if your tagline is really supposed to be helping you position and say, I am different than everyone else, those words are not going to help you. There's a really great slide in the report that has a word cloud with all of those words, the top 30 words used in taglines. And I put that up. I give presentations. I show people that slide, and the whole audience every time is like, that's us. We've even crafted like a fake kind of description of a firm out of those words, and it just sounds like every firm. The words you use is such I think an overlooked way to really set yourself apart and create some memorability. It's hard work to come up with like good taglines and good messaging, but I think that work is really worth it. When you think about like just in the kind of marketing communications process, you think about human psychology. What's the like first thing people really remember about something or someone? It might be the visual, but more often than not, it's the words. And a lot of that just comes down to the fact that we are human beings, that we communicate with words, right? We're not podcasts. It's all words.
Words.
And it's an amazing tool when it's used right and it's really used well. But if it's not, like if you're, and I'll, might ruffle some feathers here, but if you're just using AI, ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever, to generate all of your content, it's not going to be differentiated at all. Even if you're doing a little bit of light editing, I guarantee you're going to sound just like everybody else who's using those same exact tools.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's pulling from the same pool of information, and that's what remains the glimmer of hope for humans is our creativity.
Yep.
And being able to bring some of that in. But they might figure that out down the track. We'll see. But right now, be thankful you're a human, that you have creativity, and you can take those things and build on them, make them better, all that good stuff. But it is so true. And we work with firms for years, so many, and often what we're talking about right now, that's not their expertise. Our listeners, their expertise is not this.
Yep.
And why would we ever expect, not to say that they're not creative, but
No.
like being wordsmiths or really paying attention to what's needed to stand out and to have a brand that's remarkable and will be, memorable for people. Like, that's not what they do. Their expertise is making sure everything is done correctly and that there's good sound advice coming back to the owners of the firm or whoever the stakeholders are that need that data, right? That's their expertise. So it really is where this is your expertise. I mean, deep knowledge and wisdom and experience over the years that you've been doing this, and now all this data is just remarkable, right? So it's no surprise that people are really interested in this, and that you can really help, especially in this vertical, help people get it right the first time.
Yeah, and I have a fundamental belief that everyone is creative at some level, right?
Yes.
I think that's part of the human experience. We have different applications of it. Some of us are more skilled in certain areas in applying that creativity. My hope is like whether it's this index that we've put out and all this data we've collected and analyzed, or I wrote a book on brand strategy a few years back. My goal is really just like, hey, let's all help each other level up in these different areas of creativity, in whatever way it makes sense. Every business is at a different phase. I'm sure some of your listeners are probably like, I'm wearing all the hats. I'm wearing, the production. I'm having to actually execute as a professional for my clients, and at the same time worry about the marketing and sales within my firm. And that's a lot to carry, right? And so what tools can we provide? What information and education and data can we provide that just helps everybody get better? Doesn't always have to mean like, oh, you got to go hire an agency or you got to go hire some, rock star consultant to help you. And I'm not saying I'm a rock star. There's others out there that are rock stars.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I used to be a rock star. There was 5 years of my life where I tried to be a rock star. But that's a whole different story. Yeah, just, how can we help each other level up at whatever level we're at in terms of, the business, the scale, size, maturity, whatever, however you want to kind of look at that. So
That's right.
That's a big part of my passion. And, I think, just why would I even want to do this? Why would I want to put this kind of data out there? A lot of it is just like, I want to see lots of brands do better. And if that means engaging directly with us, having us help them, great. If it's a good fit, a lot of them aren't. I'll be first to say, there's a lot of companies out there. I'm like, you don't need us. You just need to implement a few more tools, or you just need to incrementally do things a little bit differently. You don't necessarily need a big agency to help you. You can even use the resources you've already got. If you've got freelancers helping you, contractors, if you've got someone on your team who's kind of a, creative marketer type person, and they do a lot of different things, they dabble in a lot of stuff. These are great tools for them to just level up and say, okay, what are we going to pick on maybe in the next 6 months that's going to help improve our brand differentiation in the marketplace? What's going to help us stand out a little bit more? And then incrementally, move that needle over time. It doesn't have to be an all-in-one kind of solution. I think sometimes people get hung up on this idea of the only way to really change the perception of ourselves in the marketplace is to do a big rebrand. And that's emotionally exhausting. It's a ton of time, and it's some resources, right? It's some financial resources to do that. And I'd say, that happens. That's why my company exists. We do that with a lot of firms. But there's a lot of things you can do incrementally on the edges to improve your brand. And that was a big part of why we put this index out, was to show it's not just about rebranding. It's about just seeing where there's these opportunities beyond the core asset. Your logo and your name are really important. You might not be in a position where you can change those right now. So what are other things that you can change? That's why can you add in some colors? Can you refine the fonts? Oh, that was a really interesting one. Sorry, I'm tangenting here.
It's
but
okay. It's okay, yeah.
We looked at font usage on websites, and the top 10 most used fonts across the index were all free Google fonts. So there was like kind of this immediate like aha moment of, if you want to like really easily, it's really not hard. It's not very like intensive or technically difficult to just change what fonts you're using. And, almost every firm probably either themselves or someone that they're working with on the marketing and creative side has access to Adobe Creative Cloud, which gets you access to thousands and thousands of premium fonts that you can use in all of your collateral and on your website. There's web versions of them that are pretty easy to implement. And that's a really easy, it's subtle, but it's a kind of sneaky, subconsciously subtle way to brand yourself is through your font usage and get away from some of the free fonts that everyone gravitates to because they're free. Fonts are not terribly expensive to use. So if you're looking for kind of an easy, low cost way to start differentiating, maybe start looking at the fonts that you're using. And you will see a difference. Once you see it, you'll be like, oh, yeah, we feel different when we use these compared to everyone else who's using the same free fonts.
And that's where I think it's really where someone like yourself has the ability to take those fonts and make music with them. And I mean, to use the analogy of music, right? There's some people who can put it all together and write great music. There's lots of components to it. Not everybody's good at that. And you can get it really wrong as well with using fonts and what it looks like. And I mean, having something, I think with every business, if it's your business, number one, your first customer is yourself. Well, I think with the brand, your first customer is yourself. Yep. If you love your brand and what you're putting out there, and you love your logo and you love your website and you're very proud of it, then that's a win. Other people might think it's unremarkable, but you've still won. You love it. You're proud of it. That's, I think, baseline. And also for many of our listeners on here, there's people who are very successful, running successful firms, don't even have logos or websites. Yep. Which is still in this day, people would be amazed.
Fascinating.
But it's fascinating because the service they offer, if they're great, they can have a lot of business just from word of mouth. And so, but you have to remember that those same businesses, if they put a little energy into it, would have that much more of an impact likely that they could have. So it comes back to that, hey, what do you want? I think you mentioned that in the beginning. It's like, what are you trying to achieve? Where are you trying to grow? Where are you trying to get to? But I like the idea of having something that you're putting out to the world that you love. And that's where, if you really, really want to love it, and you don't right now, someone like yourself can help get to the love. Like I look at your brand right away. I'm like, I really like that. Now, not all people would think that.
No.
But I do, and I'm sure you do.
Yep.
Right. And so that's like a big win for you as a business owner. And I think for our listener, it's like, hey, it's your calling card. It's your business. You do this every day. You're growing it. You're putting your life into it. And that's where in this world as well, where everything's moving so much to digital, this is where you get to that tactile piece of like something real. It's like a business card or whatever. A lot of times in this day and age, a business card is just for you.
Yeah.
You're never going to give it out, right?
Yeah.
But if it gives you confidence in what you're doing, I think that's a win as well. So it's I think stepping back, the brand also is really important just for the psychology of the business owner. And if you're super happy with it right now, then that's great. But if you're really happy with it and you love it, then other people likely will. And then that's again, what are you building?
Yeah. And we can talk all day about all these best practices or principles of great design or great writing, great messaging, great branding. I would still argue at the end of the day, I would rather have a client who is just authentic and true to themselves and doing the best they can to communicate that with the tools and the resources and the knowledge they have, than one who is just like, well, I'm going to use all these best practices, but I'm going to make it up. And it's not really us. It's fake or it's false or it's forced. And I just find like time and time again that approach falls flat. Not only like you're not in love with it, and so you don't use it. You don't talk about yourself well. You kind of are always holding back, like, I never really want to send our website out to anybody. I never really want to share my business card. Like it holds you back because you're like, it doesn't feel real or it doesn't feel true. Um, then someone who is like, no, this reflects us, and maybe it doesn't apply every last like best practice or principle, but it is us. And I think there's tremendous value in just being really true to who you are, whether you're a, single owner operated business all the way up to like, thousands of employees, of like, figure out who you are, what's your unique identity, what's your culture, what are the values that drive you to do the things that you do. And then, yeah, if there's some ways to layer in some better communication principles, do it. But I would much rather see, organizations, businesses, certainly clients of ours, really start to understand, like, who are we really? And let's get as specific as possible. Let's get as clear as possible. Let's maybe start using some language that reflects that culture and isn't just, I can't tell you how many times I've walked into leadership teams and we put the values on the wall, we put them up on the screen or we put them in front of everybody. And it's like, hey guys, I hate to tell you, but like, these are the same words everyone else uses. I guarantee you, when you guys actually, when like the rubber really hits the road on these values, you probably use other language. If it's like excellence, I doubt anyone in your company is like getting really excited about that word. There's probably other ways you're communicating. Let's pull those out. Let's find out what those are, or find the deeper value behind them that's really driving you and saying like, okay, we aim for excellence, but why is that, right? What is that cultural identity behind that kind of pursuit? And that's a big question I encourage everyone to ask, is like, whatever you're doing from a brand perspective, ask why, and then ask it again, and then ask it a third time, right? Like, okay, we're at this level. Well, why is that? Well, now we're at this level. It's a little deeper level. Well, why is that? Is there a deeper level to that? And then when you run out of answers to why, you've hit the core. You've really hit kind of like the internal drive of your organization, or for you as a business owner. Why is it we do these things? So that's getting into a whole nother
yes,
arena.
I love it. But I do love it.
That I love talking about. But yeah, being authentic, being real with your identity as a firm.
That's lovely. Well, this has been fantastic, Mike. I think there's a lot here for our listener. I think the first step for them is to get this index. I mean, it's their industry. Yep. Every single listener should be downloading this to have a look and understand it wherever they're at in their journey of their brand. Like you said, from the very beginnings to right on up there. You seem like a real knowledgeable expert in this area. And so this is a great place for people to hang out, learn a bunch more, and then perhaps you can help them get there to the next level that they're looking for. Again, let's maybe give that link to the index. Yep. So they can go find it. And of course, we'll put it in the show notes. And then if there's anything else that would be useful to direct our listener to, please do it.
Yeah, rsnd.co/index. You can get the index report. When you get that, you'll obviously get an opportunity to request your score. If you're not in the index, I'll let you know, and we'll get you in for the next round. That's my promise to anyone who reaches out. If for some reason you're not in the index this year, in this last version that we had, I'll make sure that you're in the next version. And then also, if you want to kind of find out more about me and about our organization, ReSound, ReSound, creative.com, resoundcreative.com. And then if you want to reach out, mike@resoundcreative.com is my email. Anybody can reach out, ask me questions. We do run a monthly open Q&A session around the index. It's 30 minutes every month. Anyone can join that. If you download the report, you'll get an invitation to that as well. So just encourage everybody to get the report. And then from there, there's lots of opportunities to engage or find out more, learn more, ask questions. We'd love to answer any of those questions that you might have on those monthly Q&A calls.
That's great. Well, that's super exciting. Really love it. And I can't wait to check it out myself. I'm sure there's going to be some great learnings in there. And I really want to thank you on behalf of our listeners for coming on the show.
Thank you, Michael.
Beautiful. And with that, we wrap. Another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.